And Doc, this week's episode of Tigers Talk is brought to you by DC Sports at Lakeside Mall in Sterling Heights. Follow them for all your authentic sports memorabilia needs and for terrific autograph signing sessions. And speaking of following them, you can do so on Twitter at DC Sports Detroit. And make sure to check out their terrific website at DetroitCitySports.com.
If you found $100 on the street, would you pick it up or keep walking? Of course you take the money. So why do you keep picking winners and not betting on them? That's why I go to MyBookie. It's fast, it's easy, and they pay you when you win. Let's face it, guys, where you're betting is just as important as who you're betting on. So do the smart thing this football season. If you're going to bet, bet with MyBookie. Did you know you could bet on games after kickoff? If by the second half it looks like you're going to lose your bet, you can always just take the other side at MyBookie. Join now and MyBookie will double your first deposit. Use promo code Detroit100 to activate the offer. That's promo code DETROIT100. Visit mybookie.ag today. You play, you win, you get paid.
Fellas, I want to tell you about a product that can improve your performance in the bedroom. And what better way to improve the quality of your life than to please the woman of your dreams? Blue Chew brings you the first chewable with the same FDA-approved active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, so you know they work. Blue Chew is the fast and easy solution for any man looking to enhance their performance and step up their game. You don't have to be one of those guys that finishes quickly, or you don't have to be one of those guys that, at the end of the day, regrets not having a great sex life. Blue Chew is prescribed online and shipped straight to your door in a discreet package, so no in-person doctor's visit, no waiting in the pharmacy, and best of all, no more awkwardness. They're made in the USA, and since Blue Chew prepares and ships direct, they're cheaper than a pharmacy. Right now, we've got a special deal for our listeners. Visit BlueChew.com and get your first shipment free when you use our special promo code Detroit. All you got to do is pay the $5 shipping and handling fee. Again, that's BlueChew.com. Promo code Detroit to try it free. Blue Chew is the better, cheaper, faster choice, and we thank them for sponsoring the podcast.
This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Brian Peña. I always join the Vito podcast, the best podcast in the United States.
And welcome to the latest and freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Geronimo Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and broadcast partner in fun. That is Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon, as I have started 6th grade of middle school. John, how are you doing? You're a proud father of 2 daughters that are both in school now, and your wife is elated, and you are happy yourself, aren't you, that they're back in school?
Man, Vito, we are already in September, the September call-ups. You're going back to school.
Back to school, baby. 6th grade.
Check out our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast to see what we're talking about. Oh, man. It's interesting. Did you get a chance to see the list of the Detroit Tigers September call-ups? I looked at that list that I saw that was tweeted out, and I said to myself, can we just send them all back? I mean, look, Vito, it's a tough time. Obviously, it was nice to see the Tigers compete versus the Twins a little bit, but unfortunately, the Tigers were way outmatched. The Twins were just able to match the baseball, and the weekend was okay in terms of watching the Tigers, but again, seeing Buck Farmer make it difficult for Jordan Zimmerman to earn a win. The fact that the Tigers just aren't winning a bunch of games at Comerica Park makes it really tough. And then, we'll talk about it a little bit later. Unfortunately, some somber news for the entire Detroit Tiger family and organization. The passing of a Double-A minor league player that's really sad in terms of a tragic nature, in terms of how someone passes away. It makes it for a tough go for the Detroit Tigers. And the Detroit Tigers, they're kind of limping into the end of the year. But there's a lot to talk about in terms of the fact that Ron Gardenhire did address his future. Justin Verlander maybe potentially may go to the Hall of Fame, but will not wear the Detroit Tigers hat. All that and more on this edition of the podcast. What interests you most? Where are we getting started at?
John, really quick regarding JV and the hat that he wears in Cooperstown one day, because he's going to be a Hall of Famer, no doubt. Major League Baseball picks a hat that he does end up wearing. Thing is, gotta believe it'll still be a Tigers hat, but if he wins another World Series championship, another Cy Young, and with the Astros this time around, think about that, the implications of that for JV and his Hall of Fame candidacy, but also for the hat that he dons in Cooperstown one day.
Let's start there because of the fact that now another athlete, another former Detroit Tiger is balling out. And it makes you wonder now because that's 3 immediate players that have left the organization that have done significantly better not being with the Tigers. We're talking about Nick Castellanos, James McCann, and Justin Verlander. What's going on? Because when the numbers start piling up like that, when you start looking at athletes that leave the organization, Justin Verlander obviously wasn't healthy. We have to add that into the mix. There were seasons where he struggled with that flexor in terms of, rehabbing and things like that. And that's a tough injury. That's a tough injury to come back from, the abdominal flexor situation that he had, and it makes it hard to regain that velocity. And he said for a better part of a year or two, he wasn't the same guy. But immediately when he went over to the Astros organization, he came out and said that, you know what, their analytics department, the way in which they taught their pitchers, the way in which they utilized numbers, the manner in which he was, brought into that organization and utilized the skill set that they had at the Astros made it much better for him. And now the proof is in the pudding. A couple seasons later from being traded, the guy is balling out. The guy is lights out. Must see JV is back. And it's really unfortunate because it's starting to look like the trade that the Tigers made was not proper in terms of the value you got back. And now you look at Nick Castellanos. He's a fan favorite. He's like going to be the mayor of Chicago. James McCann, another mayor of Chicago for the White Sox. What's going on, Vito? Why are the athletes that are leaving performing at that level, whereas when they were with the Tigers, they were nowhere near what they're doing right now?
Detroit sucks.
That's the attitude, right? And I think, too, and you joke, but Nick Castellanos hinted at it. He said, and I think that's another mark. And for me, that's a demerit on Ron Gardenhire because he said, Castellanos was asked by the media, he said, when you're out of it by 20 games on June 28th, it's no fun. And just, it feels like, he said, it feels like I got called up to the majors. That's not right. You were in the majors, Nick. You were on a team that was playing in the major leagues, and you owed it to the fans, to maybe even not say those kind of things. But I understand losing sucks, and the attitude and mantra will not be the same when you go through a season and there's a lot of losing. There's no real expectation. But that's the manager's job, is to keep the ball club up and fighting each and every game. And for Nick Castellanos, I just feel like he, succumbed to the mental side of the game. Justin Verlander, obviously, I think he's a workhorse. He dove right into the system with the Astros, and he learned from it. James McCann now is having a better year. So I think the Tigers also have to look at the fact that even though, yes, competitively, the roster that's been put together is not going to be enough to win a World Series, but they're not this bad. They're not 55 games under 500 bad. And I think that's partly due to the fact the coaching, the analytics, who's being brought in here, is the entire recipe is not good enough. And I think if the Tigers are going to be a franchise that's going to be evolved, you got to be able to have good coaches because eventually speaking, Vito, you can't have it where, you have all-stars across the board. You have to bring in guys and develop them. You have to have it where you say, hey, we're going to bring in somebody, and he's going to outshine his expectations, whereas the Tigers, they bring in people, and by and large, a significant portion of the athletes are not performing up to their capabilities. That's a problem. That's a red flag, and people are starting to notice it.
So that's a demerit on Avila.
Yes.
Because he's bringing in the wrong guys, letting go of the wrong guys at the wrong time. JV specifically, and that's Dave D actually with Justin Verlander. Okay, we can pinpoint Dave Dombrowski for making a mistake there, and actually with the extension and Avila trading him and not getting a great return for him. But Jordan Zimmerman, a guy that now is a vital member, has to be, but hasn't been a key cog in the Tigers' rotation, and doesn't look like he's going to be at this point in his Tigers' career. Well, that was a mistake made by Avila. So you can pinpoint that on Avila and other signings that haven't worked out. But a guy like Jordan Zimmermann, who has produced of late, his last 4 outings, I believe now, he's been relatively effective. Well, he was supposed to spearhead this rotation, so the loss of Verlander wouldn't be too extreme. Well, it is now because you have guys like Jordan Zimmermann who are hugely, hugely underperforming and aren't going to ever be worth all the money they're making in a Tigers uni. But back to Verlander really quick here, John. And now, by the way, he has 3 no-hitters in his career, 2 against the Blue Jays, both at Rogers Center. The last time he did it was in May of 2011, John, with the Tigers. Don Kelly was a member of the Tigers then. He is now the first base coach of the Houston Astros, and the Astros went into the Rogers Center over the weekend, and Verlander threw that no-hitter, his 3rd career no-no. And he's 36, by the way, now, as well, John. Think about that. And now he's in the record books on this list of guys that have at least 3 no-hitters. It's few and far between. It's a select crowd of pitchers. And I believe all of them, and maybe I think one of them actually hasn't reached the Hall of Fame, won't reach the Hall of Fame. But Verlander is with all these other Hall of Famers on this list, John. I mean, this is huge in terms of Major League history. It is huge what Justin Verlander now has accomplished. And think about it, John. He could have 5 no-hitters realistically in his career. Remember, Josh Harrison broke up the one with the Pirates on that breaking ball that Verlander left over the plate. Harrison got the hit against him. When Harrison was with the Pirates, Verlander was with the Tigers. So that could have been a no-hitter. There's probably a couple of other games. So you could say for sure he could have had 5 already. Think about that. Nolan Ryan is number 1 all time in terms of no-hitters thrown. Ryan has 7 to his name. He is right now an advisor to the owner of the Houston Astros as well. And really, that was a guy that Verlander idolized growing up. The guy that he wanted to replicate his game after, mold his game after. And Verlander is on his way of doing so because Ryan pitched into his 40s, threw his last no-no at 41 or 42. So Ryan kept being successful until his 40s. Why can't Verlander at this point?
So here's the question that a lot of people are debating and discussing. Justin Verlander is open, and he's talking to a lot of people. And you know what he's saying? He's saying, you know what? Down the road, maybe if there's an opportunity to end my career with the Tigers, he might want to come back. He said that he's open to it. He loves pitching for the Tigers. He loved the experience. He definitely is a pitcher that grew up here throughout the organization. He said that, you know what? Maybe in a couple of years, if the rebuild kicks off, do you bring Justin Verlander back at 38? Do you bring him back and say, you know what, be a guy that's a leader, share your experiences with the young cats? It's intriguing to me because, you know what, imagine you got Bo Burrows, you got Casey Mize, and then you have Justin Verlander being the 4th or 5th at 38, 39, and he still got it, potentially speaking. He could be all the way as high as number 2 or 3 in your organization if he still got it. Do you see it down the road, Vito? Justin Verlander donning the old English D once again?
I really hope it does occur. I really do. And if it does, I think it'd be a good thing for the Tigers. It might help them as they get competitive again. He can be that veteran presence, a guy that can still pitch relatively effectively. And can we expect him to be a Cy Young caliber arm at that point? No. Would love for him to be that good, that must-see JV still, and throw a no-hitter with the Tigers again. But is that really feasible? Probably not extremely. And if you play a game of Big Vito's over-under and place the odds at 50.5% of him being an ace-caliber arm if he does return to the Tigers one day, it's below that mark, definitely. But would love to see it as a Tigers fan at heart, as a kid that cried when he threw his first no-no in 07. I remember crying when he did it against the Brewers. I came home from a game that I played in Little League Baseball or Umpton, one of the two, John, and I broke down in tears. I remember being made fun of by you, by the way, on the air a couple of years ago when I wrote that piece for the Detroit Athletic Company regarding crying watching JV. But it was Tigers history, man. I was a young kid. I was still a child. I wasn't an adult yet, and the Tigers hadn't achieved much success, and JV was the most successful Tiger I had seen at that point. Miguel Cabrera, I think, has surpassed him since. But JV, on the mantle of great Tigers players that I've seen in my lifetime, he's number 2 or 1B, and Miguel Cabrera is 1A. So, hey, the tears happen. I admit it once again, as I did 2 years ago or whatever that was. And
did you cry this time?
To make the point, did I cry this past time? No, I didn't cry this past time, okay?
Okay.
But I would cry again if he pitched another no-no with the Tigers when he does return with the Tigers one day, which, if and when that happens, I will love it. And I might cry just because he returns to the Tigers too, John.
Do you think Ron Gardenhire deserves to come back? Okay, because of the fact that he did address it. He said he'd like to continue his work with the Tigers, that he knew it was going to be a rebuild, but he understands either way if the Tigers make that decision. And many people on both sides of the fence, it's debatable, but many people are also saying, you know what? Maybe even Ron Gardenhire doesn't even deserve to come back because of the fact that this season has been awful. A lot of the guys haven't developed. A lot of the performances have been subpar. Does Ron Gardenhire deserve to come back? And obviously, you're not going to leave him as a lame duck. You know, he's entering into his last of the 3 years. Is Ron Gardenhire getting an extension? Is that what should happen?
Tigers are 40-95. I don't think many guys deserve an extension when that is the case. They're going to lose easily 100-plus games. I mean, it's September 3rd, okay? And they got all this season left to play, not a ton of season, but still until the end of September. And you have 95 losses already, John. It's going to exceed 100 losses easily. And I think when you start talking about 100 or 100-plus losses, the manager deserves at least a little bit to be on the hot seat and doesn't deserve an extension whatsoever, even though what he had to work with coming into this season wasn't limited in terms of talent. So he can't do anything about that. That's about the front office and the man calling the shots, which is Al Avila, and then the club owner, Chris Ilitch. So a lot of that does fall on their shoulders, but still, Ron Gardenhire, for this team being this bad, John, I think he deserves at least a little bit of the blame.
That's a fair point, Vito. And tell me a little bit about, and let's be fair, what are the strengths that Ron Gardenhire brings to the table, and what are some things he can get better at? Because I look at it and I say, the attitude of the team just hasn't been right since the losing started, right? When you remember at the early part of the year, they were around 500 and things were looking okay. But then once, a couple of the starters went down, and then, obviously he had to shuffle things around, the season just took a dive and they never recovered. But Nick Castellanos kind of talked about it. I feel like he didn't handle Nick properly. I feel like Nick Castellanos was just free to blast away for the Detroit Tigers. I feel like he hasn't handled Miguel Cabrera properly. I feel like he's taken this gloves-off approach, whereas sometimes a guy like that deserves a little bit of criticism. Maybe he needed to talk to Miguel and Nick and say, hey, take the reins. Stop with this all this talk in the media about some of the stuff that you're not happy about, because I feel like that clubhouse got a little bit loose, and I feel like the performance on the field in terms of defensively did not look right. I don't feel like this club, now you can say that they're not talented enough, and that probably speaks more to their abilities at the plate. But defensively, I do feel like, hey, if you're going to put a guy at second base, make sure he's doing the work and make sure that, hey, this guy can field the position. And I know that, a guy like, for example, Nico Goodrum is playing basically every position. And so some of the mistakes he's made, but by and large, you're seeing once a week, two athletes run into each other. You're seeing plays that don't look like they're being made by major leaguers. And that's something that's on Ron Gardenhire. You got to go out there and at least preach defensively. Hey, here's the fundamentals. The coaches got to put that together. Now, are you going to win every game? No. Are you going to have guys hit grand slams? No. But can you at least go out there and play 9 innings of solid defense, go out there and hustle, have a good attitude? I still think that was lacking this year, and that's something that Ron Gardenhire maybe even will look at himself and say, man, I don't know if I got through to these guys. But going forward, I do think he deserves to stay. But at the same time, if you want to kick off a rebuild, who better than maybe a young manager, somebody out there in major leagues that's maybe that's going to be let go at the end of the year that could come in here and also be part of the new wave? Because I do think some more people are going to, more influx of talent is going to come in the next year or two. I think that maybe potentially there's a chance that maybe Ron Gardenhire doesn't come back. Maybe he just says, you know what, let's part ways. Because how many years do you give Ron Gardenhire? Do you give him another extension on top of it? You give him 2 years? Do you give him 3? There's no real right answer. And I would say, you know what, the proper answer maybe would be to move on. Just move on.
Well, maybe you can bring in Gabe Kapler once he gets fired by the Phillies. Another, young guy. You brought up a young guy who has a little bit of a managerial experience, played with Brad Ausmus, and we all loved Brad Ausmus here in Motown when he was the Tiger skipper, didn't we? No. Don't bring in Gabe Kapler. I'm just joking here. But Ron Gardenhire being fired after 2 years as Tiger skipper with the limited talent and what he had to work with in terms of that talent, he's not going to be axed. He would leave by himself. It'll be that or mutually they'll agree to part ways, and more or less and more, it would be Gardenhire deciding to leave because of the fact that he doesn't see the writing on the wall being positive for him and leading to an extension for him. with the Tigers.
If he doesn't get the extension, does he manage in 2020? Does he just did you allow him to manage and just say, okay, everyone knows it, that hey, do the job, honor your contract, and then just walk away mutually, like they did with Brad Ausmus. Ausmus wasn't fired; his contract ran out, and they just didn't renew it.
But not renewing your contract
It's the
means
same.
firing the manager too. So this wouldn't be a firing if Ron Gardenhire now mutually decided to part ways with the Tigers. That would be him leaving before his contract runs out, which it runs out after 2020. So for him choosing a return for next season, it's a big decision. And I think bigger than he thought when he first signed his contract to be Tiger skipper, because I don't think he saw the bottom falling out as much as it has this season, John.
You're right. I don't think he saw that the team was going to be that bad. But how much of an excuse do you give the injuries and the fact that they traded off Shane Green and Nick Castellanos? Do you allow that to be a pass? Does Ron Gardenhire get a pass for the level of play and the quality being not where it needs to be? Does he get a pass this year?
Doesn't get a pass for the trades because they were stinko and epically bad before they traded Castellanos and Green. But regarding injuries, I would say for sure he deserves to get a pass because you had Matt Moore go down with injury. Tyson Ross go down with injury. Michael Fulmer wasn't healthy to start the season, out for the entirety of the season. So you had guys go down left and right with injuries. So for that reason, he deserves a pass. Truly, he does. But for trades that have been made around the deadline, with Shane Green being moved and Nick Castellanos being moved out of town, no, that's not why he gets a pass. For the injuries, I'll give him a pass, John.
Fair points, Vito. Let's take a timeout, show love to the other sponsor of the network, and we'll come back, and we have to unfortunately share some bad news. The Tigers organization, unfortunately, had to put out a press release regarding the passing of one of their players that was playing in the minors, was playing at Erie. We'll talk about that and what this week holds for the Detroit Tigers in the second half of the podcast.
Doc, as you know, one of our fine sponsors at the DSP Network is the Detroit Sports Commission. And guess what? I just did some work for them over the past weekend for the 15th annual Zenith Prep Kickoff Classic. It was held at Tom Adams Field on the beautiful campus of Wayne State University. And I loved working over the past weekend. Saw some great games and saw some great people as well. And with that being said, you can follow the Detroit Sports Commission on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports. And make sure to check out the Detroit Sports Commission's terrific website at detroitsports.org. And back here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, and it is episode 201. 200, I think, was well received. The voicemails, the memories, and our guest, Jordan Hall, last week was terrific to have on. And now we kind of move into a somber moment here on the podcast as we announce the news of the passing of a Tigers minor leaguer. And that would be Chace Numata. And he died after suffering injuries in a skateboarding accident. So a terrible tragedy that has hit the minor league baseball community, and friends have set up a GoFundMe page to cover expenses for his family to cover travel and hospital bills. And you can find the GoFundMe page on my Twitter page at Vito Jerome.
It's a tough story. And Vito, those that play in the minors, they're young. They're young baseball players, and for them to go through something like this definitely hits home, because every time you hear something like this, you see, the brotherhood, you see the love that they had for each other, and several of the athletes for the Erie Seawolves definitely were going on Twitter and sharing their memories, sharing what a good guy he was. And I read online that it was one of the first early days of the season, and Chace saw someone sitting by himself, and he just sat down and started a conversation. He was a connector, and I like people like that just kind of bring people together, that are really open and social. And everyone that covered him really said that this guy had like this real energy, the spark around him, and that's something that's infectious. And you saw all the pictures, the jovial photos that you saw online that were being shared. It seemed like someone that really loved baseball, that was coming into his own, and he had opportunities to catch a bunch of different people. He had the opportunity to catch some of the minor leaguers that are going to be the future stars of the Tigers. So this news is tragic, and unfortunately, he died in an unfortunate, tragic skateboarding accident. And everyone that's shared stories has been real kind, and it's a major loss for the Tigers organization. It's real unfortunate And, I hope that everyone does go to your Twitter page, Vito. And if you, find it in your heart to donate, definitely do that through the GoFundMe platform.
Absolutely. You guys should do so. So trying to move it into a positive here now on the podcast. And on a positive note, I did release news of my fundraising and what happened over the course of the last month. Donations came in, all from Make-A-Wish Michigan here. And I ended up raising in totality north of $8,000 through my 4th annual Chirco and Company charity softball game, with proceeds benefiting Make-A-Wish Michigan, and for the 4th straight summer. So next year being the 5th annual game that I will be holding. So should be fun next year. Great support from you, John, here at the Podcast Network with the donation that you made, and for everybody else that sponsored the event and donated and really showcased any kind of support. So thanks to all of you for doing that for me. Now, moving on to another Vito Chirco-related thing, I guess, here is I want to make a prediction. So I saw the Nats over the course of the last month go 18-7, John. That's kind of my team right now, the Nationals. And that was a Major League Baseball best record in the month of August. And I really think they're going to make a run to the Fall Classic. And I think the Stros, after seeing JV throw this no-hitter, I think JV and the Stros are going to get to another Fall Classic and win yet another championship with JV being in that Astros rotation. Sad but true for Tigers fans, I think, aplenty. Maybe we can be elated for JV as well, but I think only for that first championship, John. I think Tigers fans now would be devastated to see JV win yet another ring, and not with the Detroit Tigers, John.
I'm kind of hoping to see Dodgers Nationals for the pennant. Wouldn't that be great? Dodgers Nationals, I think that'd be great.
In the NLCS?
Yeah,
in the
that'd be
NLCS,
awesome.
that could happen. I think it very well could happen. Dodgers, Major League best. Yankees right there in the AL. So Yankees, you know what? You can't sleep on them. You can't sleep on the Dodgers. Both have an embarrassment of riches. DJ LeMahieu just hit a game-winning home run. This guy that Chris Newell of the USPBL and the Birmingham Bloomfield Beavers trained at one point. And this guy from Brother Rice, terrific season. What a great signing by the Yankees, has done terrifically. And Gleyber Torres just had a terrific month of August. Aaron Judge is back hitting home runs. They got a supreme amount of talent there in the Bronx. And then the Dodgers do too. Cody Bellinger has 44 bombs, I think, now with the LA Dodgers. So Dodgers, Yankees, that would be supremely good for Major League Baseball in the ratings. But I think you're going to see somebody else in the Dodgers this time around. And I think it's going to be the Nats, surprising some people because they don't have Mr. Bryce Harper in the middle of that order or just in the lineup, because Bryce Harper's been a guy that has hit kind of all over the top of the lineup and can hit the bombs as well and has done pretty darn well for the Phillies of late. Has a WAR of nearly 3 and has 30 bombs this season for the Phillies. So the Phillies' struggling ways of recent memory isn't because of Bryce Harper, John.
Interesting prediction that you made there. I'm interested to see how the races shape up for the month of September. Definitely at the top end of baseball, there's quality. But across the league-wide, I think the talk has been that there's too many teams that are in rebuild mode. I feel like the league is a copycat league, and a lot of the teams just aren't in contention, which doesn't make the competitive balance really that fun to watch. Yeah, you have the top-end teams, but then you have the teams like the Tigers, you have the teams like the Marlins.
Who you saw. I mean, that was bad to witness, right?
Exactly. There's too many teams that are in this process of rebuilding, and across the board, it doesn't make for a fun league to pay attention to. Yeah, at the top end, great. You got the Yankees, you got the Nationals, Dodgers, Astros. Those guys rebuilt, and riches aplenty for them. But for the rest of the league that's kind of deciding what to do, a lot of sellers, and it kind of sucks. It really, wouldn't you agree that this year, really following across Major League Baseball, not only following the Tigers, that the league in and of itself really hasn't been that intriguing?
Well, Tigers, Marlins, Orioles suck. I mean, how many other teams kind of suck or suck enough to say they're not worth watching? The Royals, in the same division with the Tigers, AL Central Division, they're not that good of a ball club still. Tigers are trailing them by like 8 games in the division. They're not going to catch them in the month of September, but Royals suck too. And you can name a bunch of teams that are rebuilding and have officially not just rebuilt now, but have tanked. And that's bad. That's bad for the overall league. It really is, isn't it, John?
Yeah, that's where the league has to do better in the coming years. There's got to be more of a middle ground.
Yeah,
it's either you're a contender and playing well, or you're like bottoming out and looking at playing a season with north of 100 losses, and nobody really wants to follow that. So look at the Tigers. Look at the Tigers in comparison to the Twins. The Twins are mashing the baseball. They changed managers. They had an established manager in Paul Molitor. They realized something's off, something's different, and they retooled. They brought in a new manager, and look what they're doing. They can hit, they can pitch, They have solid infielders. They have solid outfielders. They got a solid. They play solid defense. A real fundamentally sound baseball team that can do something. So look what they've done. They've turned it around relatively quickly in terms of rebounding from a subpar year, and they're right back in the mix. And that's what you're looking for with the Detroit Tigers. And hopefully they can get back in the mix and to compete in the Central. But league-wide, yeah, it's not been all that great. Yeah, the top-end players are doing some things. There's been some great stories. But by and large, in terms of storylines, really, we haven't even touched on many major storylines in terms of major national news in the world of baseball. Because obviously you and I are surveying the landscape, I really just haven't come across big Major League Baseball news. Have you?
Well, it's become the John and Vito show.
That's it.
In so many words, and who's listening to that? Nobody.
Tons.
No,
The
tons of
masses.
people. Tons of people are. Come on, they are. Regarding the Twins really quick. Tigers beat the Twins on Saturday night. Did you know that? A big Tigers W there.
One win out of the 4, right?
One win there. They got a W. That was good to see. Twins in that game set the Major League record for home runs in a single season. How about that from the Twinkies, who are mashing the baseball? Then you look at the Tigers. They came in, hit a home run. Came in by runs, it seems like at times. Saturday, they looked all right. And they have sparingly, though, throughout the season. And the reason why they've only looked, good sparingly is because they suck and they're tanking. They've officially tanked at this point, John.
One positive note that we will share. People did gravitate toward the call-up of Brian Garcia. People were like, oh, who was brought up? Tell us a little bit about him. What's he bring to the table? And what is his ceiling for the potential to be successful with the Tigers?
Well, he's a guy that's had some success on the farm, okay? And the Tigers need some pitching, right? Adding to their pitching depth, and this guy is going to add to that. But realistically, long-term, is this guy going to be a promising guy at the Major League level that's effective for the Tigers out of the pen? More than likely not. Okay, I'm not going to bank on him being productive. And the Tigers this week, how about what they have coming up in terms of matchups? Nothing too enticing. On the road at KC.
Maybe pick up some victories there.
Maybe you will. Friday, they're at Oakland. So they're going to take on the A's on the road. They're making up a game, remember, suspended game from May 19th, the game that I was at.
They're going to lose that one.
They're going to lose that game and lose that weekend. And that's a 4-game set because of the doubleheader, with the makeup included, and that doubleheader being played Friday. So, 4 losses maybe there. 3 losses at least out of 4. Then the Tigers do return home for the Bronx Bombers for 3 with them. And then you've got the Orioles for 4, including a game on Monday. So the game or the series extends into a Monday as well. Kind of weird, just like this past series with the Twins extended into a Monday and extended into Labor Day officially. So to sum it all up, I will be there at the ballpark next week for Tuesday's game with the Bronx Bombers. Should be fun to see the Bronx Bombers and what they're made of. And, you got to expect a series sweep from the Yankees at this point, obviously. Then a very exciting series with the Orioles. Okay, when it comes to tanking and getting it done in a tanking fashion, these are the teams to model yourselves after, the Tigers and the Orioles. So I'll be there next Saturday for that one against the O's as well in that 4-game set. So season is winding down rapidly here, John, and the Tigers continue to stink up the joint, but we will continue to have fun on Tigers Talk.
Thanks so much for downloading the latest edition of Tigers Talk, each and every Wednesday, available on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Follow Vito on Twitter at Vito Jerome. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. If you're watching a game, feel free, message us. We're definitely paying attention to all the teams here in Detroit. Thanks, Vito.
Guys, wish me good luck in 6th grade this year. Adios.